Welcome to the Future of Field Service podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to be talking about the intersection of servitization and sustainability. I'm thrilled to welcome back to the podcast today, Dr. Andreas Schroeder, who is the digital lead of the Advanced Services Group at Aston Business School. Dr. Andreas Schroeder has allowed me to call him Andy, so I will do that from now on. Andy, welcome back to the Future of Field Service podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah, for having me back.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited to chat with you again. Andy was on a previous episode of the podcast. I wish I had written down what number that was. It would be a great one to go back to, but we'll put that in the show notes. We had a really good conversation about how we need to leverage data and how we need to think about data related to driving servitization. Today, we're going to talk about a completely different topic, but one that is top of mind for a lot of folks right now, which is sustainability. And we're going to be talking about how servitization really fuels sustainability and vice versa in some different ways. So Andy, the Advanced Services Group is gearing up for Servitization Live, which is an event that you all are hosting at the beginning of October. And sustainability or climate change is one of the three mega trends that you all have defined that you will be talking about at the event. So before we dig into our conversation for today, why don't you tell our listeners just a little bit about what those mega trends are, what Servitization Live is about, and how they can check that out if they're interested in getting some good insights.
Yeah, of course. So the three mega trends that we are looking at in the context of servitization, and we talk about servitization itself in a minute. But so we see servitization as a very innovative business model that has direct implications, not just for the companies engaging with this, but wider societal implications. So the specific ones that we were looking at is its contribution to topics like aging population. There's just no going away. We are, as a population, we are aging, and there are technologies and ways of interaction that can help to manage this situation. And servitization plays a role in this. There's food and food security is another mega trend. We all, as the population grows, food is an important resource, more important than ever. Again, servitization has a role to play in bringing in technologies and different partners of food supply chain, making sure that food security and efficiency of food can be managed. The one that we will be talking about today and looking at the intersection is sustainability in the wider context. So we're looking at climate change, resource utilization, and so on and so on. These are the three trends. So sustainability is the one that we're focusing on in the podcast here. The event that we are gearing up, and thank you for pointing this out. So there is a big executive conference that we are mounting. You find this under the title Servitization Live. It is a mixture, it's a hybrid event. It's from the 4th to the 6th of October, including, taking place physically in Birmingham, UK, but will be streamed worldwide in real time, of course. We will have a number of very interesting guest speakers coming from industry. So the names that will be represented and they will be presenting is Goodyear, Schneider Electric, Baxi Boilers, and Omron Technologies. These are some of the names. And they will be discussing from their point of view how servitization activities already helps their businesses, what their future plans are, and what their contribution for their companies are to their sustainability goals through this business model. Yeah,
excellent.
So it's an event. Please, visit the website. If it's of interest, please register. It will be a very good event. We're expecting around 600 people to attend as last year, and I hope we exceed this year. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely. So those of you that have been listening to the podcast or following the content on Future Field Service, you know that I'm a big fan of what the Advanced Services Group does. I participated in the event that they held last fall, and I'll be participating in Servitization Live as well. Certainly don't come because of me. There are many wonderful guests that will be speaking and sharing and talking about how these mega trends are in their minds and in their strategies, and how that trickles down into their individual businesses. So we'll make sure to put the link to check out the event in the show notes. But for now, let's dive into our chat for today. So as Andy mentioned, the trend or theme that we're focusing on today is sustainability. I think that what I like about how you all have planned Servitization Live is, to really urge people to think about these mega trends, because I think, it's very natural for business leaders to get very focused on their day-to-day, their views and their world. And it's important to do that, but it's also important to take a look at the bigger picture of what's happening and how that all plays in. So today we're going to talk about this intersection between servitization and sustainability. And the first thing I want to talk about, Andy, is the differences in perception of products between traditional product delivery or production models and servitized models. So can we talk a little bit about what that difference is and how that relates to this intersection between servitization and sustainability?
Yeah. Okay. I think this is a good starting point. Maybe before we go into the detail, the way I understand sustainability, there are societal obligations towards sustainability, and there, of course, companies have their own strategies and so on. So what I argue is that these are not contradictory to each other. So a good run business, or specifically a business that tries to move into the advanced services space, naturally meets, and I will show this in my explanation, naturally meets and contributes to sustainability objectives. So these are not two diverging interests that need to be balanced out. The interesting thing is that these are very well and very nicely aligned, and the speakers at the conference will map this out for us as well. So when we talk about advanced services, for us, this is a move away. Largely, we focus on manufacturers, and we support around 300 manufacturers in their move from only focusing on their products, designing, developing, manufacturing the products, and then selling it on to the customer, to a situation where a manufacturer designs, produces a product, but instead of selling it on to the customer, the manufacturer retains ownership and responsibility for the product. So it often becomes a pay-per-use scenario. So the classic example is the Rolls-Royce aero engine example, where Rolls-Royce, for a large number of engines, still stays responsible for the functioning and performance of the engines, and the airlines are paying by the amount of thrust they take out of this engine. So this is a significant shift for manufacturers from being producer of products to provider of services on the basis of their product.
Services and in a lot of cases outcomes, right? So they're really selling that outcome in a lot of instances, right? So kind of a step beyond selling it as pay per use or pay per service, and selling it as pay for an outcome, right? Maybe not in every situation, but in many, right? So that makes sense. So in the conversation related to sustainability, let's talk about how then the difference in model of produce to sell and offload versus produce to own, maintain, and deliver outcomes on contributes to the topic of sustainability.
Yeah. I think this is the angle to understand this. So in a traditional business model, and we generalize here, of course, there are
Mhm.
differences in companies. So we look at, generic business model of produce to sell. The objective is to make a profit margin, of course. The objective for design is not necessarily to look at the full life cycle of the product. The objective of the design and production of the product is to make it attractive for purchase.
Mhm.
So there will be a lot of innovations that companies would have in their drawers that would not meet the price point that they have identified for their customers.
Mhm.
So these will not be developed, or they make the product a bit more expensive, probably a bit less attractive for an initial capital investment.
Mhm.
But maybe there's a long-term benefit to it that they fail to communicate, or they're unsure that they can communicate in
Mhm.
a sale for product situation.
Right.
So, and in a traditional business model that limits a company how much innovation they can introduce into the product, and also what is the cost of product they can they're prepared to invest and sell. So when we look at a change of business model from a product to a servitization context, a lot of these changes. So we are in a situation where the objective is not to sell for an immediate price point, or to design for an immediate price point and sell, but to be able to deliver services on the back of a product for a longer period of time. Some of the contracts we're looking at are 10-year contracts or servitization contract. So this is a company that designs a product and knows that the company they are responsible for it, for the use and service and outcome and possibly efficiency of the product for a 10-year period, will naturally design the product in a different way. And we see this with companies like Rolls-Royce. When they design an aero engine for service, that is a very different aero engine. There are very different design principles than if they would design an engine just for the immediate sell and not continuous ownership.
So just to clarify a couple of points for my mind and for listeners. So this is not to say that manufacturers in a traditional business model are producing garbage or intentionally producing products that are not good, but they are, by the nature of staying in business, they are producing products that the market will bear, right? So they are producing products to the degree that the market will bear, in the sense of selling that product under a traditional capital-based sales model. And so in that, there are certain, when you mentioned innovation, there's certain restrictions on innovation. So some of the things that could potentially be done to, let's say maybe put higher quality materials into that product, or to, design it and produce it with the ultimate, duration of life in mind, versus us having to stay at a certain price point. That's where we're talking about, there's differences in how these things could be produced if the goal was not to produce what the market can bear for a capital expenditure. And so if you look at it now, moving to the servitization model, the manufacturer is retaining ownership of the product and they're responsible for delivering the outcome. So then it makes sense to invest more in the production of the product to extend that life cycle, because ultimately they are, benefiting from that longer term view, right? And that will help them in terms of their ultimate profits by innovating in the way that the market won't bear on a capital expenditure model. Okay, so let's talk about this just a little bit to make sure folks are understanding. So when you are going to build a product to be longer lasting, there's more expense to that, right? And so this is where looking at servitization, or the shift to a pay per use or as a service model comes into play. So let's talk about why and how that is.
I mean, longer lasting is one aspect, but for example, serviceability. A lot of products are not designed to be easy to service in the sense of easy to exchange parts that deteriorate in order to be able to maintain the entire product and give it a longer life. So we know this. There is, and again, you know, thank you for pointing this out. This is not talking down companies and their design objective. If you are competing on price, and a lot of companies, you know, it doesn't matter in which price point there is a price element in the way they can position themselves on the market. There are restrictions of what they can innovate and what prices they can ask for, and that limits it. So the beauty of the change of the business model, that it takes away some of these limitations and allow companies that are innovative to actually use their innovation to develop products that they would otherwise not be able to. So what we have is longer lasting. So when we look at developing products in a servitized context or as part of advanced service, we have products that are longer lasting. There is no interest in companies having to replace products repeatedly, selling another one, just preparing for the next sale. There is no interest in that. The interest is efficiently optimized way maintaining this product in use, because they benefit from products in use, not from product in sale. The other part is again, every service, every repair is to the detriment of the manufacturer. It's a cost to the manufacturer. So they will design in a way that things are naturally are easier to service if it has to be replaced than there would otherwise be. A lot of these advanced services contracts also have efficiency clauses in there. So it is up to the manufacturer who provides the service to ensure certain energy efficiency or even cost down commitments. So there is sometimes there are clauses in there that requires a manufacturer to ensure that this, I don't know, a 3% energy efficiency benefit every year as part of the service. So cost down commitments from the side of the manufacturer. So these very much change how a product is being designed. So that's the design and production phase, but also it changes how the product is being in the use phase. When the product is being managed by somebody who has designed the product for a long lasting, who has part of penalties around inefficiencies, there will be a lot of focus on making sure that the product runs on maximum efficiency. So there's a lot of, this is where the digital part comes in, a lot of monitoring along the side to ensure that this is in place. And also there is a significant opportunities to look at the end of life of a product. So again, traditionally, when we have a product for sale model, these products are being sold off after a while. So there is there's a primary use, and then a pump or machine will sold out over to secondary use and possibly internationally gets distributed. So there is very little chance for a manufacturer to be systematic about remanufacturing some of the products that are being taken out of use. They disappear somewhere and reduce efficiency and cannot be traced back. So when we have a situation like we're describing in a servitized context, where the manufacturer retains ownership of the product, has to monitor these products, be responsible for them, it's a natural, easy process to actually remanufacture these products and take these products back and put them into a, remanufacturing recycling context. So this is some of the sustainability benefits of advanced services that are not there that are part of the business model. They're not an extra, a kind of an ethical or moral obligation. This is to optimize the business of the manufacturers in advanced services context.
Yes, that makes sense. So we're talking about the difference in products being optimized for sale versus being optimized for use, right? And so I want to emphasize the point you just made, because this is a conversation you and I had when we first talked about this topic, which is, there are people for whom sustainability is a very, very important topic when it comes to their, personal beliefs and objectives and how they want to contribute to the environment in a positive way and all of those things, right? And we see that reflected in a lot of like you said at the very beginning, there's the personal obligation side of this and there's the corporate obligation side of this, right? And you see some correlation there. But I want to go back to the point you just made, which is, nothing we've talked about so far is something that is important simply to benefit the environment, right? I mean, it does, and that intersection is fantastic in the sense that these servitization objectives and journeys have that impact. But what we're talking about here is really just good business, right? I mean, that's all we've talked about so far is if you are on a servitization journey, it benefits you from an efficiency standpoint, from a financial standpoint, to put these measures in place that also improve sustainability, right? So let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that, there is again, we're generalizing for the sake of a podcast discussion, but I mean, there is a group of people that care deeply about the topic of sustainability and want to altruistically take measures to have a positive impact there. And there are people that maybe care less, I mean, not to sound negative, but I mean, there are people for whom it isn't as big of a personal objective, right? And so the point is, whichever side of that lens you're looking at this from, the benefit is the same, right? If you're looking at it from the sustainability lens, there's benefit. And if you're just looking at it from the value of servitization and how to maximize that value, there's benefit, right? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, there's another dimension that will come in, and in the future, I mean, we just as an example, in the UK, we have now a new legislation has come out that by 2025, no gas boilers can be installed in new houses. Mm-hmm. So for a manufacturer of gas boilers, that means if they don't change technology, they have no business.
Right.
So I mean, there's forget about the more obligation and the environmental constraints of gas boilers. From the legislative point of view, they do not have a business within 4 years' time. So they need to innovate technologies in order to be in business, and customers need heat. So they are now looking at technologies that, for example, heat pumps, which is more advanced technology than the traditional heating boilers. But these technologies are more expensive. They're more difficult to manage. They require more calibration, more looking after than a traditional gas boilers. So they are now into the trap that we described, where they have to innovate. The technologies are largely there, but they don't match the traditional price point of a gas boiler around the, 4,000, 5,000 pounds. So they are now working, and all of them do this, at saying, okay, the legislation doesn't allow us to go for a traditional technology. The legislation is based on sustainability goals from the government, but even if the company doesn't subscribe to them, they will not have a business if they don't meet these goals. So they are now looking at finding new business models around advanced services to make sure that their higher value technology that is more expensive and probably out of reach for a couple of new homeowners can still be put into market. They have a business, and their technology can be provided, and their expertise can be of use in providing heat. Yeah. So I looked at this is on our side of the pond. I mean, the Americans, you have similar sustainability goals. So that means there's 50% reduction by 2030. This is in 9 years' time, 50% reduction of CO2 emissions. There will be, if they are not yet, significant legislation coming out there for private citizens, for companies. There will be a lot of new technologies coming on the market to meet these goals. It will happen. There's if the goals are met or not, but the legislation will be there and the incentives will be there and the penalties will be there. Again, we are in the space where new technologies, as I described with the gas boilers, come onto market, possibly at a different price point, requiring new business models for these businesses to have a business, a viable business.
Right. So that's a good point. And so what we're really talking about is disruption, right? And where that's coming from. So there are, you and I have known each other a while, and we both talk with companies regularly who are embracing the journey to servitization. Okay. And many of them have begun that journey because they saw the opportunity to do so, right? And they saw the opportunity to differentiate their business, to provide different value to their customers, to embrace a business model that would really transform their value proposition and their company and how they operate and everything. So, those folks maybe have a bit of a head start in the sense that, if some of those companies are then impacted by this legislation, they kind of have a start toward, that transition. However, even those that haven't yet, right, embraced the journey sheerly based on the opportunity they see, now they're being nudged to do so, right, because of this legislation. So the disruption is coming in the terms of a threat, not an opportunity. But regardless of how that's coming, it's just the reality, right? And so, the opportunity to servitize and the opportunity that exists to change the business model so that they can develop the products they need to develop in the way they need to develop them to meet those legislative restrictions is really pretty awesome, that opportunity exists, right? And so however you're kind of coming into the journey, it's a really exciting journey to be able to embark on. And I think you make a really good point about the US, and it's probably safer for me to say this than you because I live in the US. But I mean, I think we do lag a bit in a lot of areas, on this topic related to, some other countries and regions. But you make a very good point, which is the objectives are there and the legislation comes next, right? So it is going to come, right? And so there's an opportunity here for those organizations here to get ahead of that a bit, right? Rather than waiting for that to be looming and to be trying to race through this, there's an opportunity to look ahead a little bit and to sort of see what's coming and to get ahead of that. So, that's a really interesting point. And I think, we talked a bit about for you all and the organizations that you work with, what have you seen related to the catalyst? Is there differences in the catalyst for why companies are embarking on this journey? Have you seen that reflected in when companies come to you and they say, hey, we want to servitize and here's why? Are those stories different today than they were a few years ago? Or how do you see that evolving?
Yeah, I mean, there are different kinds of motivations and they always show up in different ways in these companies. So the buckets that I would put out there to group these, so quite a number of them come from digital angle. They're saying, okay, we have now digitized our products, have a good understanding. What are the business models that help us to get more value out of our investment in digital? So the traditional, we discussed it in the first podcast, the advanced services is one of the business models, or I would even argue the business model for digitalized products.
Mm-hmm.
The other company, the other bucket is certainly companies that, and often quite successful companies,
Mm-hmm.
that's saying, okay, the competition is creeping up. We believe that we have an edge in terms of product innovation and so on, but we are getting squeezed on price. So let's look at a new business model where we can
Mm-hmm.
make use of our innovation and our expertise, and not have to compete on price with the competition.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are seeing also, in the last, the case of a boiler, for example, or other companies we're interacting with, where companies literally see the absolute need of the constraints that the traditional business model puts on the way they can interact with customers. Just as another example, again, in London, I'm not sure what the year it kicks in, but it started to become a low pollution, entire London, city of London, not just the city, the environment, the metropolis of London, a low pollution environment. So manufacturers producing, or even products being used, we talk about trucks, we talk about cranes, we talk about diggers, we talk about everything, will have to meet these requirements.
Mm-hmm.
All the alternative technologies are electronic based, will be more expensive, more difficult to maintain, require different kinds of care, do not fit traditional models. So if you're not companies coming to us and say, we see how the market is being constrained for us for the right reasons. They don't even blame legislators for it. And they see that this is it's a game change for them. Now we have to respond to this. Again, coming from, as a not from altruistic motives, but as somebody, as a leader of a business that needs to make sure that they have a business in 15 years' time. And they're also, sometimes it's based on legislation, sometimes they're customers. So their customers, if it's a progressive company, their customers want to have certain commitments and a certain energy efficiency benefits, seeing from their supplier, because it becomes part of their own energy balance. If I run a production line, I'm responsible for all the energy emissions that are being created as part of the production line. If some of the machines are not owned by me, I'm still responsible. It still shows up on my balance sheet. So I want to make sure that my suppliers of products helps me to achieve these emission targets that might be there because of law or because of strategy or ambitions. So there is a cascading effect now also where companies hold each other accountable and enforce each other's business model, therefore.
So this is probably a really unfair question, because I don't think there's any real way to answer it. And I know that you're going to want to give me a concrete answer. But when would you say that the traditional business model is just going to become largely obsolete?
I don't think it will. I can give you a precise answer, and the precise answer is the innovative companies will start. We already see it, not will start. They are starting to change the business model. But even a company like Rolls-Royce, Aero Engine, will still have a market for selling some of the products from the traditional way. So depends on, I would hazard a guess that the more innovative companies would of course embark on it further, but even the most innovative companies will still have a business related to traditional products. But what we see and the benefit of having this advanced service in place is the innovations that come out of designing products differently and looking after product differently. They seep over into the design of the products that are for sale market. So any kind of efficiency, any kind of improvements will not just be isolated to one part of the business. So I don't think there will be a world where traditional business models totally phased out, but definitely the advanced services business model takes over. And it is always there, some companies spearheading, some regions are spearheading. Scandinavia is very much ahead of most of the rest of the world. I mean, Europe
Mhm.
is catching up. The US is actually involved, and it will involve further and further regions of the world. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it goes.
I mean, like I said, that was unfair and probably poorly stated, because I don't, maybe obsolete isn't the right word, but I mean, you just think about, you know, there's a point at which the lag just becomes insurmountable. Do you know what I mean? Like the companies that are innovating and the companies that are not, like, I think there will reach a point where that gap is very hard to close. You know, I mean, I do think that, you know, while the traditional model won't become entirely obsolete, the demand to embrace this reality is immense. You know, I mean, I don't think that a company can just say, oh, you know, we'll just keep doing it this way and, you know, we'll continue to be successful. It just seems that is virtually impossible. Okay. I'm trying to think if,
let me just add to another. I mean, you say it's virtually impossible. We have examples of companies that I don't know what the proper word is, that didn't pick up a trend. I mean, we Polaroid, Kodak, Blockbuster. There are examples of companies who missed the trend, and some can catch up, some cannot. So it depends on the setup. So some innovative companies miss trends. So it can always happen. I mean, the information is out there. So that's one thing. The other interesting thing that we've seen over the years, I mean, I started with the example of Rolls-Royce. These are high value, very high value items. I'm not sure the price point of an aero engine, but let's assume it's you know, we talk about millions. The price point of products that are becoming attractive for advanced service models are now in the level of boilers, which are around, you know, a couple of £1,000s. So there is the change over the last 10 years in what is possible and what is feasible is dramatic, largely related to, you know, building up expertise, opening up to the business model, but also the connectivity part.
You're saying to servitize. So the potential, it's almost like I wrote an article, it was years ago, but I don't even remember the exact angle, but it was talking about the trickle down effect, right? So it's the same concept, right? You know, this originated as a business model that seemed feasible or, you know, a good opportunity for a company like Rolls-Royce that produces products that are millions of dollars, but it's now becoming an opportunity that is equally viable to a company that produces boilers that are, you know, a couple of £1,000. You know, there's, go ahead.
Yeah, just one point to it. I mean, if we take the same mindset or the as a service, and we wind back 10 years ago and we looked at, you know, software as a service coming around the corner, and of course this started with, you know, very innovative companies, but now if you develop a piece of software and you don't have an as a service proposition, you probably don't have a business,
right? If
you expect that everybody will host themselves any version of your software, and you don't have a business. There's you know, a lot of companies will still offer this. It is getting wound down. Sometimes you cannot host it yourself. I mean, try to host Gmail yourself. It's a tricky proposition. Right. But this is the way I see it with advanced services as well. That it starts with the innovative companies. It starts with the bigger companies with a high value product. It trickles down into smaller value products. And I just, for our conversation, I looked up, just to close the loop, the energy efficiency of as a software as a service or cloud services versus hosting yourself is around 90%. So 90%, if you would use the same software hosting yourself as an SME versus you would versus going into the cloud and using some of the cloud space available, you reduce your energy efficiency, you reduce your energy consumption by 90%, or the CO2 creation by 90% going into the cloud. Not the same numbers
Mm-hmm.
in our as a service proposition, because we talk about products, physical products that need to be shipped, that need to be produced,
Right.
but we talk also about significant potential in
Mm-hmm.
energy and CO2 emission reduction.
Yeah.
Based on the
Yeah.
same principles.
And product waste, right? In the sense of what we talked about initially, which is these products being intentionally developed and manufactured to last as long as they can, right? Yeah.
And
it's really
recycled at the end.
Right,
so lasting,
right.
and the recycling loop, which again is a big chunk of
Mm-hmm.
what needs to be done by companies for their own efficiency's sake, and which
Mm-hmm.
has the added benefit for sustainability aspects. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love this topic. I think it's so interesting. We have a podcast coming up with Tetra Pak. And it's a whole sort of extension of this conversation, which is looking at the opportunity for, beyond their own products, right? But looking at the opportunity to offer sustainability efforts as a service, right? And to help other organizations, improve their own sustainability efforts. And so, it's really interesting now I consider them a leader, an industry leader and one of the more innovative companies, but those are the best to learn from in the sense of what we talked about with the trickle down, right? So to listen to those stories and to think, how could that apply to my own business, I think is just really cool. And there's a ton of potential here. There's so many layers to this topic. And I really enjoyed talking with you today and having this conversation, and I'm sure you'll come back. Is there any other, comments or words of wisdom that you would like to close with? Any other thoughts?
Everybody who's interested in this topic should definitely register and attend our Servitization Live conference.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I outlined the speaker, but what you will hear is innovative companies, or for example, who are in the heating or cooling business, mm-hmm. that again servitize, and they will also map out their servitization journey, the strategy, the objective, their motivations, but also show how they are under significant scrutiny in terms of sustainability and climate change. I mean, the cooling and heating is one of the major sources. So they use this new business model to make significant headway in standing up to the scrutiny and innovate in a way that benefits their business as well as meeting governmental targets. So if anybody's interested, and you should be, then you please join Servitization Live.
Awesome. Yes, I definitely urge you to do so. And just to reiterate, what we talked about today, the two objectives are inextricably linked, right? So, that's the really exciting thing here, is that this intersection is real. And, as organizations embark on their servitization journeys, they're going to improve sustainability. And as companies focus more on sustainability, they're going to turn to servitization, right? So that's a really cool thing, and it'll give us a lot more to talk about. So we will be sure to put the link to the event in the show notes so that you can all go and register, and I urge you to do that. Andy, thank you so much for joining me again today. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yes. You can find more by visiting us at futureoffieldservice.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn as well as Twitter at The Future of FS. The Future of Field Service podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more about IFS at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.